Oh, me, DawgNation, I am chomping at the bit. I know many of you are as well. Hey, it's Brandon Adams, the host of DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you, and thanks for being with us here today. I wish I was in Nashville right now. Can't wait to be there this weekend. I'm sure all of you are just as excited, so we'll do the next best thing. If we can't be game day, if it can't be game weekend there in Music City, how about we get ready for it? We'll talk a lot about what Kirby Smart had to say yesterday. Fascinating stuff coming up on the Georgia running back situation. Couple key issues still facing Georgia as it gets ready to make a push towards what could be a national championship. There are big ESPN predictions out there. We'll weigh in on them. Kind of an interesting thing that Kirby Smart said that kind of went below the radar yesterday. I believe it has a specific meaning. I'll explain what that is coming up in today's show. Surprising news coming out of Tennessee. There's just a lot going on today, so we'll try to cover it all. We're really glad you're with us. As DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So coming up in just a couple of minutes, Kirby Smart yesterday going into detail about the Georgia running back situation. I think this is really interesting, and it really closely aligns with what we've been saying now on DawgNation Daily for months, what I wrote about at DawgNation.com over the weekend, but nice to hear Kirby validate that yesterday. We will get into that coming up in just a moment. Before we get there, though, both personally and professionally, I talk to a lot of UGA fans. And over the course of the last few weeks, and really for the offseason in its entirety, but especially lately as we get close to the start of the season, a common conversation for me to have with someone goes a little something like this. BA, are we going to really do it this year? That's what the Georgia fan wants to know. And the insinuation there is, and I know this, you know this, I don't even have to say this out loud, but it's true. It's probably worth saying out loud. A lot of Georgia fans feel like they've been in this spot before. They've had expectations, whether it be personal expectations or kind of conjured up expectations on the part of the media. They know what it feels like to start a season believing a national championship is a real possibility. And they've been disappointed before, and they don't want to be disappointed again. We kind of all get that, right? We don't have to say it out loud. That's a common experience that we've all been able to share together. And yet, as you start the 2019 season, there's that reminder of that in the back of your head somewhere. So one of the things that we've done around here a little bit is that when we've seen big predictions being made, we've kind of cataloged those a little bit to kind of remind Georgia fans, hey, it's not just you who thinks Georgia has a chance for the national championship. There are other people there as well. And for a while, we didn't see many of those. For a while, it was Georgia as the third best team or Georgia as the fourth best team. Maybe it makes the playoff, but it's not necessarily going to win the national championship or kind of anything like that. And yet, as of late, there have been a few more people kind of put themselves out there on a limb. I know Clemson's the overwhelming favorite, they may say. I know Alabama's the overwhelming favorite, they may say. But I'm going to go for the next team on that list. I'm going to go for Georgia. We talked about, the Bear, Chris Felica, and his buddy Stanford Steve from their ESPN podcast the other day. They were talking about that. To the extent that you might care, Danny Sheridan, longtime handicapper, I believe he's picked Georgia win the national championship. And you could kind of find your own sort of list, not necessarily A-list celebrities, I'll grant you, but there's kind of a growing sense of some folks who say this may not be strictly an Alabama-Clemson show. Georgia may have a seat at this table there as well. Add to that list now ESPN's Mark Schlabach. At ESPN.com, he and another writer have their bowl projections up. And in that, we see Schlabach picking Georgia as one of two SEC teams, along with Alabama, in the playoff. He's got apparently Georgia beating Oklahoma in one of the national semifinal games and going on to play Clemson for the national championship. He doesn't pick a winner for that game because he's just projecting the bowl games, but he's got Georgia playing for the national championship. So if you're one of these Georgia fans wondering, is my team really a legitimate contender for the national championship this year? Can it legitimately overtake Clemson, Alabama? Add Mark Schlabach to the list of guys who apparently think that's possible this season. Now, however, we know the challenge that faces Georgia. As I said before, Schlabach, like a lot of people have, put Georgia in as a second SEC team, which means Alabama is still an arch nemesis, still a foe to be vanquished. Bill Conley at ESPN.com as well has got some numbers to back that up, that once again, at least on the basis of projections, Alabama is at least on paper still a little ahead of Georgia, which gives the Dogs some work to do here during the season. Now, of course, Kirby Smart, if I were to sit down and talk to him about this, would kind of reject all of this on spec, and we understand that. We know where that's coming from. In fact, yesterday, He basically said, listen, when you get ready for the start of the season, even the guys like me who've been watching this as closely as anybody has at practice, this is what Smart would say himself, even someone like me, you can't be completely sure what's going to happen once these games start getting played. I like this from Kirby yesterday. Take a listen.
Nobody in the country knows what they got till they go out there and play, and so many kids that haven't had to respond to the lights that, it's going to be really fun to see some of these kids grow up and play.
Yeah, it is going to be fun to see that. And while it's probably true that in terms of the granular specifics of what we'll see from Georgia or any of Georgia's top competition for a national championship, we may not know exactly what's going on with that, exactly what they bring to the table. We at least know the big issues for Georgia, one on offense, one on defense, that will determine how high Georgia climbs this season, how much better it is now than it was a year ago. The Georgia offense, statistically, the last couple of years, for instance, has been really good. Ranked in the top 5 in almost all the offensive efficiency categories and things like that. From the folks who crunch those numbers, Georgia's done pretty well. And yet, from time to time, it seems like there was this extra gear missing. The kind of gear that Clemson found in the national championship game against Alabama with Trevor Lawrence throwing to Justin Ross, or the kind of gear that Alabama found for most of the regular season with Tua Tagovailoa putting up these record-breaking, eye-popping statistics. The Georgia offense has been good, but maybe by comparison, not quite as dynamic. That's an issue that we know Georgia faces going into this upcoming season about proving some of these national championship predictions true. And the good news on that is, here in this week before, these few days before Georgia starts the season opener, Kirby Smart's openly acknowledging this. And for those of you who want to see more offensive production from Georgia this year, more exciting passing plays, whether the offense changes all that much or not under James Coley, Kirby Smart at least seemingly acknowledges here that is part of the football equation at the highest levels of college football in 2019. I actually really like this quote from Kirby. Take a listen to this.
You have more offense than you don't always show, and you try to use what you need, and what you don't need, you don't use. So there's things that we had in games that we didn't use in the past, and sure it'll be that way now. We want to be explosive. We want to be able to score points. I think in college football nowadays, you got to be able to score points. And you look at the best teams in the country, they can do that. So we've got to be able to score points. And whatever it takes to do that, whether it's wearing people down or throwing the ball, we got to be flexible enough to do it.
I mean, listen, the specific reason why I play that audio there from Smart is when we watch on Saturday night against Vanderbilt, beating that foe isn't really all that much to write home about, but it is a potential precursor for what we'll see later on in the games that truly matter, and the ability to, quote, score points and be explosive on offense. As we all evaluate whether Georgia truly is a legit national championship contender or simply just better than most of the rest of the country, how explosive it proves to be on offense, whether the offense changes under Coley or not, how explosive that offense turns out to be is going to go a long way for a lot of us in determining how realistic Georgia's chances of winning the national championship actually are. Now, on defense, there's also another scenario that is, I think, almost equally important. From a statistical standpoint, it may be more important because what has lagged behind for Georgia the last couple of years has been some of its defensive dominance. It's been good defensively. Last year, it did a really good job at limiting negative plays, for instance. 2017, it did a really good job of keeping teams off the scoreboard. But sometimes those stats can be a little bit misleading. Sometimes you want to actually do more than that, to, I guess, borrow the phrase that Georgia has been throwing around a lot this offseason. Sometimes you actually want to impact the game on the defensive side of the ball. You want to get tackles for loss and sacks, the so-called havoc plays that we've now written and talked about ad nauseum. Well, here we are just a couple days before the game when you start to look ahead to Vanderbilt and the chances that Georgia looks like a national championship contender in week one. Don't forget about that aspect of the overall formula for Georgia as well. Here's a little more from Kirby on that.
No, we talked about defensively. We think we've got to create some more negative plays, and that's been a big focus for us. Red area, we were not where we need to be in the country. Turnover ratio, we were not anywhere we didn't make our goal was an area of improvement, and our goals are pretty lofty goals when it comes to offensive, defensive, and special teams, and we didn't make many of them. So that's always an area that we try to concern ourselves with.
So let me very clearly wrap this up as succinctly as I possibly can. Based on the predictions from a lot of ESPN guys, on paper, Georgia is clearly a national championship contender. But how do you turn contention on paper to actual performance on field? It's explosive plays on offense. It's negative plays on defense. And maybe this Saturday night against Vanderbilt, Georgia fans will get to see a preview of exactly that. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you, and thanks for being with us live on video, 10 a.m., DawgNation Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're on the radio at noon, of course, in Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and we are available as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really glad to have you with us today. Now, coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to say hello to Mike Griffith, who was at Georgia practice yesterday, a part of Kirby Smart's last press conference of the week before he'll head to Nashville on Saturday. We'll get a lot of thoughts from Mike here coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, let's go around the doghouse. It's presented today by my friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia, a great resource to turn to for foundation issues or waterproofing issues or anything like that. Now, as I said off the top of our program, there was a fascinating conversation that went down with Kirby yesterday on the subject of running backs. Now, you may have read my Own the East piece, brought to you by Georgia's own credit union at DawgNation.com, late last week, where I kind of touted Brian Herrien for a big year, especially in comparison to guys that have been more highly recruited than he's been, maybe have gotten more attention because of their somewhat, I don't want to say celebrity status, but well-known college football players, well-known recruits. Sometimes they get talked about more than Herrien. But Herrien, I think, has been a nice little secret for Georgia for quite some time, and that secret may get out on Saturday night against Vanderbilt, and Kirby Smart heavily accentuated that point again yesterday. So as you start thinking about how the running back production is going to be distributed, as you start thinking about how the pecking order is going to be established, as I've been telling you now for quite some time, don't count out Brian Herrien. I believe he's a major part of this equation, and Kirby Smart validated that in a strong way yesterday.
Brian, since he's been here, he practices and plays with unbelievable toughness and effort. Every cut-up we watch on special teams when we're doing drills, he's at the front of the line, he's competing, and he doesn't play on a lot of special teams, but he develops. He's that's part of his trade, is that he can go do those things. And then as a running back, he's picked up pressures this year better than he ever has. He's run really hard, tough yards, caught the ball well out of the backfield. But he's kind of always done that. He's just never been in the limelight. And I think this is a great opportunity for him, for a guy that's had a really good camp and run the ball tough. He's been kind of just waiting on his opportunity, and his opportunity is now.
I think it's amazing how much of what Kirby says there sounds so similar to what we've been saying here on DawgNation Daily for quite some time. You know, Georgia fans sometimes have an assumption that when a guy is not playing very much, that, to be just overly blunt and candid, he must be a bench warmer. He must be, someone not of the same status as other players on the roster. And yet what I've cautioned on is that on a roster as deep as this, the absence of playing time is not necessarily evidence of a player being a bust. He might just be waiting his turn. That's what Holyfield proved last year. I believe that's what Herrien will prove here this year, that there is sometimes a degree of patience required to get a chance to truly break out. And you heard Kirby say there that Herrien may get his opportunity to do that this season. In fact, Kirby went on to talk even more about Herrien and what he has shown during practice, what he might be able to do this year.
Well, he's tough. He's physical. I don't know that he feels like he's got a chip on his shoulder. I know he plays the game in a violent way when it comes to contact. He doesn't shy away from contact, and he seeks people out. And he's really elusive, and he's got great hands. Brian's been a really good athlete for a long time.
Also, using Brian Herrien as one of the 2 or 3 top backs in this Georgia roster this season, don't discount the value that provides Smart in terms of team morale in future years. He can kind of tell the campfire story of, hey, Elijah Holyfield waited his turn, and in 2018 he rushed for 1,000 yards. Brian Herrien waited his turn, wasn't even one of the most talked about running backs in this roster for years and years and years, and yet once he got his opportunity, he made the most of it. That's a great way to pitch to recruits a chance to come in and eventually develop into being a top-flight player, and it's a great way, I think, to control team morale and say, if you'll be patient, if you'll work and develop, eventually I'll get you some limelight, and eventually I'll get you onto the big stage nationally, and Brian Herrien may be the next Georgia back to indeed do that this season. Now, of course, the back that would seem to be the given in all this, the one sure thing, is DeAndre Swift. And yet, as we've talked about before, when it comes to the situation with Swift, it seems like we're once again, much like the start of last season, seemingly dealing with a lingering health issue. It's honestly hard to know what exactly is going on here. Swift was reportedly in a black non-contact jersey at practice last week. Didn't get a lot of carries early in the season a year ago. What does that mean about DeAndre Swift? And is that the reason why he hasn't gotten the 20-plus carry games that some people assume a great running back like Swift might be able to get? Kirby was also pretty candid about this yesterday, too. Here's Kirby again, this time on Swift.
I can't speak to high school, so I don't know that, but I can speak to the time here. He's been in the backfield with some good players. I mean, we obviously know his freshman year, and we know last year with the guys that we had in the backfield with him, really 2-3 guys that there may not be an opportunity for one guy to get 25, 30 carries. It's just the game is not built like it used to be for guys to carry that. The people hitting these guys are bigger, faster, stronger. There's a lot more licks. It may not happen that way. But I know that should it be that way, that he has to carry the ball 25 times a game to win, I have no doubt that DeAndre Swift could do that. But all goes back to, is that necessary? And you do what you have to do to win. And sometimes other guys have good skill sets. Sometimes other guys are fresher. Sometimes it's a rotation pattern. And some of our games haven't dictated where a guy could get that many carries, because some of our games have been lopsided and you don't get a chance to get guys that many carries.
So I've been saying for quite some time, and I want to restate this now, I believe that this year the overall distribution of running backs is going to look a lot more even between the top three than it would have in the year that Kirby referenced there, 2017, when it was Chubb and Michelle, who were clearly ahead of Swift at the time, a freshman running back who was a clear number 3 there. I don't think there's going to be quite as distinguished of a pecking order this season. I think between what I believe will be Zamir White and what I assume is going to be a healthy DeAndre Swift, and I've already made my case for Herrien, I think you could see a little more even distribution among those guys, where maybe nobody ends up getting the kind of Heisman-level stats you'd love to see a Georgia running back get, but everyone remains effective for the Bulldogs. It'll be fun to watch this start to play out as soon as this Saturday. It's Around the Doghouse. It's presented by my friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. And of course, ESOG is a solutions-based company. That means they offer simple solutions for simple problems, but when it's something bigger, like a foundation issue, a waterproofing issue, you see some damp spaces in your crawl space, sometimes that's a more serious fix. And of course, Engineered Solutions of Georgia is the company you want to turn to because they have 2 full-time engineers on staff. Beautiful fleet of trucks, well-trained staff. When they show up, they do good work for you. And also, let me remind you about this when it comes to my friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. They offer a fully transferable triple protection warranty, which is on materials, installation, and design. It's just one of the reasons why you want to get in touch with my friends at ESOG. You can call Engineered Solutions of Georgia right now by simply dialing 678-ESOG now. Once again, dial 678-ESOG now. That'll get you in touch with Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Good to have you with us here today on DawgNation Daily. Hope you enjoy Mike Griffith right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
I know Mike Griffith is eager to be in Nashville this weekend, getting ready for Georgia and Vanderbilt. I'm sure he's excited about covering that game and providing some answers to some of the questions that Georgia fans have been having now for quite some time. With that in mind, Mike, let me say good morning to you, and of course, thanks for being with us. And I want to start with what I thought was maybe the most interesting thing that Kirby Smart said yesterday in his final press conference before the team plays on Saturday. The simple acknowledgement that scoring points and being explosive on offense is a part of the national championship formula for any team in college football, Georgia included. Mike, I've said this over and over again, but statistically speaking, Georgia is and has been among the top 5 offenses in the country the last couple of years under Kirby Smart and what used to be offensive coordinator Jim Chaney. And yet there are still plenty of fans who say, yeah, but where's that explosiveness? Where's that Trevor Lawrence to Justin Ross pass play that seemed to win Clemson the national championship? Where's that Tua Tagovailoa to Jalen Waddle or Jerry Jeudy or any of that collection of wide receivers? Where's that dimension? Where's that left hand to go along with the big right hook? Where is that other dimension of the Georgia offense? I think it's a fair question. And hearing Kirby acknowledge that yesterday, I thought was kind of interesting. What did you make of that?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I was really interested, and I thought it was refreshing, because Kirby's a defensive-minded coach, and a lot of times those coaches, they don't worry about what the scoreboard says. They just want to get out of there with wins. One of the first coaches I covered was Gene Stallings in that 92 Alabama team. They didn't blow out anybody all year. I mean, they're playing teams, within a touchdown, and that they might have been up by 100. But, no, I like what Kirby said. As far as where Justin Ross is, there's no Justin Ross. There wasn't last year. And I know they had 3 guys drafted, but I'll be honest with you, B. I thought Riley Ridley was a disappointment. I didn't think McCole Hardman was utilized as much as he could have been. And Terry Godwin was injured early last season, and I don't know if he ever really got on track. So while I thought that was a good receiving core, I didn't think it was dynamic. And, it's so much, it's really about the players and not the plays, I think. This year, I think they will be more explosive with DeAndre Swift and James Cook.
And along those lines, the whole idea of, as Coley said when he spoke for his only time of the year earlier this month, or that the offense is players, not plays. That's the bedrock of the pro style offense. I do think it's going to be interesting how consistent that message continues to be, because, Mike, I don't have to tell you, that's not exactly always what Kirby Smart says. I mean, he alludes frequently to the idea that the kind of defense that you're in dictates who you check down to or what you change over to. It's not quite the same philosophy seemingly as, hey, we got to get the ball to players and not worry about plays and schemes. So I am a little curious to see how consistent that message is of, if you've got a George Pickens, you've got to use him. If you've got a James Cook, you've got to use him. If you've got a Dominic Blaylock or Demetrius Robertson, you've got to find a way to use him. I'm a little curious to see how consistent that, hey, get the ball to your players at the expense of falling in love with plays and scheme. I'm curious to see how consistent that message remains this year.
I think it depends on the opponent. I think some opponents you can dictate where the ball is going. I think other opponents, you're careful where you throw the ball. I'll give you an example. You just got to look at the Miami and Florida game, right? Miami knew not to go at the Florida cornerback. They were going to attack the safeties. That was the weak point in the secondary. I think George will probably scheme much the same. Vanderbilt, I'm not really sure how Kirby's going to approach that. He seemed a bit tentative and non-committal yesterday when we asked him about the game plan. I think a lot needs to play out. It's an opener, so it's a dangerous game in the respect that you've got some players who haven't been under the lights yet for Georgia. You're playing a team that you don't really know a lot about. They have 2 different quarterbacks, so I think you're going to see a very cautious game plan. That's a game you just want to make sure you get out of Nashville with a win. If you get the chance to put some points on the scoreboard in the 3rd and 4th quarter, you should do it, but you got to be careful you don't do anything too crazy early to give the Commodores life. So to your point, as far as the game plan, I'm with you, though. I think that by midseason, you better find a way to get George Pickens the ball. I mean, we've seen enough, BA. I mean, I get it. There's guys that have been in the program. They put their time in. They know all the plays. They've been to all the meetings. But all it takes is 2 pair of eyes and a brain to figure out that George Pickens has the most upside in that receiving core. It's up to James Coley to figure out how to get 83 the ball.
So I don't want to get lost in the weeds of semantics here, but I do feel compelled to respond to something that if Georgia were to allow the defensive philosophy of its opponent to dictate what it does offensively, then it's not operating on a players, not plays mantra, because obviously the defense is going to try to scheme away the best players from Georgia, whether it ends up being a guy like Pickens or D-Rob, or whether it remains to be running backs like the collection that Georgia has right now, that the other team is going to know who those players are, and they're going to attempt to scheme Georgia into doing something it doesn't want to do. So if Georgia willingly does that, and I'd say last year at the LSU game, that's kind of what Georgia did. It let LSU dictate the pace of that game defensively. Then you're not operating on a players, not plays mantra. I know that's kind of getting into the weeds, but I do think that's an appropriate point to bring up here.
I think it's fair. I think you've got a great point, and I do think the coaches do speak out of both sides of their mouth. I think the players, not plays thing for me means more about gearing an offense that's geared more towards the running back, whether it's handing it off or whether it's throwing the ball. I think that's where the most proven talent is at. I think that's where the most depth is at. I mean, let's be honest. If we go down the running back depth chart, let's just take Zamir White out of it, okay, because we don't know really yet how much he's going to be used. I think he's going to have a great season and develop, but just for the sake of argument, let's take him out of the equation, and let's just say DeAndre Swift, James Cook, Brian Herrien. Do you feel better about those 3 guys, or do you feel better about Matt Landers, Tyler Simmons, and Demetrius Robertson? Right? I mean, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? So to me, that's where we talk about designing a scheme that relies more heavily on getting the running back the ball. Now, as you said, defenses are going to figure that out, and they're going to go, oh, okay, we're going to crowd everybody near the line of scrimmage now, because we know that if you don't hand it to number 7 or number 4 or number 35, you're just going to throw it to him. And that's when James Coley says to Jake Fromm, hey, surf hand wiggle. You know what that means, George? That means you run fast straight ahead, and Jake's going to throw it up because they got so many guys near the line of scrimmage, and they can only shade that safety to one side, and he can't be on both. So he can't be on Demetrius Robertson's side and your side. That's when you go vertical. So to me, in essence, that's the game plan. Obviously, that's an oversimplification, but BA, that's what it means, and that's what I think we're going to see a lot of. I think we're going to see teams that are going to say, Jake Fromm, you got to beat us with these new receivers. And it's going to be up to guys like D-Rob and like George Pickens and like Tyler Simmons and like Matt Landers to beat that man-on-man press coverage and get deep, because teams are not going to die a slow death against Georgia. Let the Bulldogs run the ball. They're just not. They're going to gang up at the line.
So I want to talk about Brian Herrien for a moment. And I've really been touting Herrien a lot this offseason as being a big part of the Georgia running game this year. And, Mike, one of the reasons why I have been confident in doing that, and I think Smart's words yesterday validated that. One of the reasons why I've been confident in doing that is because if you want to go back through the years, and I wrote about this over the weekend at DawgNation.com, and look at the things that Kirby Smart has said about Herrien going back to 2016, going back to 2017, going through the years, he's remained very consistent. You can find lots of quotes where Kirby has said, Herrien's a good player, but we got other good running backs. It's never been one of these things of, well, he's got to do this, this, and this if he wants to get on the field more. It's always been, I see behind closed doors what's going on with Herrien. I see him every day in practice. I know what he's about. I think that yesterday the things that Smart said about Herrien were really just a continuation of what he's been saying since he joined the team in 2016. So I do expect, what Kirby said about Herrien yesterday to end up being prophetic, and I do believe that Herrien is likely in position to have a very good year for Georgia, maybe even more so than some people might imagine.
I would agree with that, and I think part of it, too, is that Brian's gotten better every year, even while he's waited for his opportunity. I mean, look, nobody is going to get playing time at Georgia by default. It's not going to happen where, you just wait your turn and the guy ahead of you leaves, and so you're the next man up. They're going to keep bringing in talented guys behind you that you got to beat out. There's a reason that Brian Herrien's at the front of those drill lines ahead of some of these other backs. Now, all that said, B.A., as Kirby told us last night, and he kind of poked fun at the media, he said, y'all want everybody to have 1,000 yards and 1,000 carries. I can't do that, guys. There's one ball. He's right. You're strong on Herrien. I like James Cook. Everybody likes DeAndre Swift. Good grief, we all know Zamir White. We all want to see what he can do. And now Kenny McIntosh turns heads in seconds. We all want everybody to carry the ball. Kirby's right about that. There's going to be competition. The thing that Brian brings to the table, though, I think, is a certain level of toughness and a certain level of consistency. You know what you're going to get out of number 35. You know he's going to pass protect. You know he's not going to fumble the ball. He's going to protect it. You know he's going to lower his pad at the goal line. He was the most efficient short yardage runner last year, and it wasn't because he was any more talented than those guys. It was because he showed more heart in short yardage situations. So that's why I agree with you that Brian Herrien is going to have a very good season. That said, it's going to be hard to keep a ball out of the hands of number 6 and number 7. Number 4 and number 7. James Cook and that number change got me all mixed up. It's going to be hard not to put the ball in Swift and Cook's hands because those are guys that can score from anywhere on the field. Arguably 2 of the most explosive running backs in the country. Brian is very good. Cook and Swift are elite when it comes to that speed. But down in and down out, I'm thinking 35 is going to carry because you know what you're going to get. Swift, as I said yesterday, a little bit of that. I'm going to call him a McLaren. Some people were insulted when I called him a BMW and said he was in the shop. I'm going to call him a McLaren, right? He's got to be finely tuned to be on his game. When he's on his game, he's unbelievable. All you got to do is go back and look at Kentucky, Florida, Auburn last year, best running back in the country that stretch in November. But when is he on his game and when is he not? What color jersey is he showing up to every day? Brian Herrien, he's bringing the lunch pail. He's ready to go.
All right, let me do a couple very quick issues before we let you go, Mike. We appreciate your time as always. I thought your report the other day about DJ Daniel apparently working ahead of Tyson Campbell during some early drills at practice was kind of interesting. I don't really know how to handicap that race right now or really anything involving those cornerbacks, especially the situation opposite Eric Stokes. I'd be curious of your opinion on that. I am going to predict that I know that there's been a lot said about Mays thus far this summer. My prediction is that Cleveland starts on Saturday night. You got any thoughts handicapping some of these hotly contested starting position races ahead of Saturday night?
Well, I agree with you on Ben Cleveland. And look, Cade and Ben, you can flip the coin, but here's the reality. Cade can play any position on the line. then you play the scenario out. If you start Cade at right guard and another position gets hurt, now you've got to take Cade out of right guard and you got to put Ben into right guard, and you're making 2 changes on your line. If you start Ben and you got Cade waiting for the injury, one guy goes out, one guy goes in. There's only one change. You got more continuity by starting Ben Cleveland. That's not punishing Cade Mays. That's just doing what's best for the team. That's what Sam Pittman's all about. Cade Mays got another year at Georgia before he goes pro. Before he goes pro anyway. So I don't think a difference. As far as the cornerback race, I'll be honest. I'm skeptical of this. I'm skeptical of DJ Daniels starting ahead of Tyson Campbell, unless there's an injury that we don't know about. BA, and the reason why is this: because last year when Eric Stokes came in, I thought he played exceptional against Missouri. I thought he was clearly the better cornerback. But you know what? Kirby went back to Tyson Campbell the next week. He showed a lot of loyalty to Tyson Campbell, that 5-star out of Miami. And I don't think he's going to pull the reins or pull the rug out from underneath Tyson Campbell for a first-year junior college guy, unless there's an injury or unless DJ Daniel has been that much better. And we just haven't heard anything that would indicate that. To me, this is a coach that's letting the competition play out. This is a coach that's letting different guys get first-team reps, and he'll evaluate it at the end of the week. I would be surprised if it still wasn't Eric Stokes and Tyson Campbell starting at cornerback.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. Let me finish up with this. So I'm of the belief that, the Vegas line for this is around 3 touchdowns. The over-under's kind of hovered in that kind of 57, 58 range, depending on where you're looking at it and the time that you're looking at it. I feel like Georgia probably covers this from a Vegas standpoint, but the thing I'm the most confident in is that this game goes underneath that 57 or 57 and a half. I see 34-10. I might see 37-10. I see a comfortable Georgia win here, and to a certain degree, I think that Georgia needs to provide that. I don't think that you want to live through the entire offseason worth of huge expectations, come out and beat Vanderbilt by 17 points and shrug your shoulders and say, well, that's okay. Georgia didn't need to do more on Saturday anyway to beat this team. I do think there is at least some opportunity or necessity to send a little bit of a message on the road against the Commodores, but at the same time, I don't think it has to be 56-0 to get that message delivered. So I'm thinking somewhere 34-10, 37-10, somewhere along that line. Is that kind of closely aligned with your thought process as well?
Yeah, BA, I got Georgia covered, and I got the under. Now, I'm just under the under, though. I'm a lot closer to that number than you are. And the reason why is I think this Georgia defense is going to be the surprise. I think this defense is going to be much, much better than anybody expects. I think Dan Lanning has brought some energy and ideas. I look at those linebackers, man, and they're like stormtroopers out there. I mean, those guys are some bad, you-know-what. I mean, they're some bad dudes. And them linebackers at Georgia are coming to get you this year. That's the most improved unit on the Georgia football team, and those guys are ready to pin their ears back and just create havoc and create pain. And I see those, I've heard about the big three and Vanderbilt talking themselves, Kalijah Lipcomb, this running back, this tight end, give me a break, man. Georgia's going to light these guys up. Vandy will be lucky to get in the end zone on Saturday night.
Yeah, Mike, that's going to be a really interesting one to see. Can't wait to see you in Nashville and read more of your coverage this week. Appreciate you being here on DawgNation Daily today, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Appreciate it, BS.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, we've potentially got some breaking news here involving a major SEC foe for Georgia. We'll do that coming up in just a moment. We're just talking about some point spreads and some over-under lines with Mike, and it gets me thinking about my friends at MyBookie. We've been telling you about MyBookie here on DawgNation Daily for a number of years. They are the ones that we would trust to get our action down and make the watching of the games a whole lot more fun on the weekend. And this year, there's even more stuff going on at MyBookie that I want to make sure that you're aware of. For the first time, they're hosting an online handicapping super contest. Now, I think these super contests are really fun. I think MyBookie is going to be the best of them yet. Did you know that first place is guaranteed to win at least $100,000? And it just only costs $100 to enter. The process is really simple. You pick 5 NFL games against the spread every week. Then you climb the leaderboard, and you can take home your share of that huge cash prize pool. That's going to be a fun thing to be a part of all year long. Also, MyBookie's got great savings for you as well. You can get up to $1,000 first deposit bonus. You can double your first deposit. It's all at MyBookie, but you've got to use the promo code DawgNation. That's all one word, spelled the way it's supposed to be, D-A-W-G, DawgNation. You can find MyBookie online by simply typing in MyBookie. That's MyBookie. BOOKIE. Find my bookie online. Use the promo code DawgNation. You can get big savings from your first deposit, up to $1,000 bonus. You can double your first deposit. You can be a part of the big-time online handicapping super contest. It's all part of the fun at my bookie here this season. All right. Aaron Suttles, longtime presence around the Alabama program. He's a radio host for WJOX in Birmingham. He also writes for one of the pay sites, The Athletic, I believe. He is reporting that Dylan Moses, the Alabama linebacker, apparently has suffered a serious injury. Now he's saying he's what he's hearing, right? He's not confirming that, but he's saying that's what he's hearing. So Suttles has been doing this for a long time. He would not be putting out something he was hearing unless he was really, truly hearing it, and it was likely to be proven true. So we'll follow this story on Moses and see where it goes. And obviously, we don't root for injuries and we don't revel in anyone's health misfortune. And yet, at the same time, the Moses injury, if it goes down, will be a major, major story in terms of national championship implications, expectations. This is already an Alabama linebacking core that is a little thinner than you're used to it being. McMillan, the linebacker, he's got an injury. He's out for the season. When Saban released his first depth chart on Monday, Christian Harris, a freshman, was listed as a starter in there. So if Suttles is right, and around here we don't have any reason to doubt him, he's been on DawgNation Daily before. That's a strong presence there around that program. Really good radio host at WJOX. If he's saying that, then that's likely to be proven true, and this is a major, major injury situation for Alabama. Stay tuned for more on this. It's not a UGA story, but in terms of how this impacts national championship races, it could very quickly become one, and obviously prayers out to Moses, who's a really fun player to watch. Just because he wears the other team's jersey doesn't mean you can appreciate him as a football player, and he's a good one. Shame for him that he's dealing with an injury right now. I was going to do a Tennessee story first. Let me do an Alabama story since we're on the subject of the Tide, and I'll come back to the Tennessee news here in a moment. There's also smaller news coming out of Alabama that 4 players will be suspended for the first half against Duke. You've got Najee Harris, the running back, along with Brian Robinson. So for the first half of this game, Trey Sanders already hurt. No Brian Robinson, no Najee Harris. It'll be an interesting Alabama running back situation for the first half against Duke. You've also, I guess, reportedly got Terrell Lewis and Devontae Smith, according to Bama Insider, missing the first half of this game. There was a heavy point spread movement when this spread opened up this week in the direction of Alabama. I want to say it went from 30 to 35. I'm not telling y'all what to do with your money. I don't think these guys being out for the first half should change the tone and tenor of the game all that much. But Alabama has not always been a given as a 30-plus point favorite. I'm talking about in covering the spread. And David Cutcliffe actually has a pretty good history of keeping games closer than the experts would think was possible. So do your own research on this. But if you're the kind of person that gets a bet down closer than the 35, now I'm sure this will change the spread a little bit with these guys, missing the first half here. But we were already kind of thinking about Cutcliffe a little bit here, so pay close attention to that. From Tennessee, the news yesterday that Aubrey Solomon, a name that longtime DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers are very well aware of. We used to talk about him a lot as a defensive lineman coming out of Lee County. Goes to Michigan, wasn't happy there. He's decided to transfer, and after a long wait where there was nothing heard, and Tennessee was apparently getting pretty frustrated here for a while, and I understand why. After a long wait, though, it was finally revealed that Aubrey Solomon will be granted immediate eligibility for the Vols this season. My guess is he's a starter along the defensive line. This is a former 5-star prospect coming out of high school. This was an elite recruit and a big win for the Vols when they got Solomon to come into the program. Now, I'm like all of you. What does this mean for Luke Ford, who, so help me, seems to have the most cut and dry case in the world, and the NCAA essentially slammed the door in his face, and yet a lot of these other the truth is, I'm not an expert on Solomon's situation, but hard to imagine a better case than the one that Ford had. He gets the immediate eligibility. Ford's forced to wait and sit out. It is an odd situation, and Tennessee, I think, gets a pretty big win here. This is a team that could obviously, like anyone else could, use some depth along its defensive line. It just got it, and the NCAA, once again, behaves in ways in which almost no one can predict and almost no one can explain. This is an odd story, but Solomon is eligible for the Vols and will make that your SEC through. I was going to do a story from ESPN on Tua and Jake Fromm. Let me save this for tomorrow if y'all don't mind. I want to get into something else I wanted to get to because there was something that Kirby Smart talked about yesterday that kind of flies under the radar a little bit, but I took it to mean something kind of important, and I'll let you decide if it means what I think it means. You can weigh in on this, and we'll give you a chance to do that. Kirby was asked yesterday about James Coley, offensive coordinator. Would he call the game from the booth, or would he call the game from the field? And Kirby gave his answer on that topic. Here's Kirby again.
James will probably be on the field. Is what we've done in the scrimmages, what he and I have talked about doing, and we're open to looking at it different ways, but right now it's probably what we're going to do.
So this is one of those opinions that I have an overly hot take on a relatively unimportant topic, and yet I feel pretty strongly about this. There is no way that it's better or easier to be an offensive coordinator on the field than it is from the booth. I can say this as someone who has sat in the press box for a long time, which is adjacent to the booth, and also watched some games from the field as well, which is the vantage point that Coley likely has from, where he's, going to be calling these plays from. He's closer to the middle than I am, but it's still on the field. It's standing on the grass. You can't tell me that you can see the action better down there on the field than you can up in the booth. You can't. But there is one thing that makes calling plays from the booth different than calling plays on the field. While you may not be able to see the action better from the field, people can see you a whole lot better. And I think what you see, and I think the classic example of this is the Lane Kiffin thing. I think when you're an offensive coordinator who's about ready to be a head coach, I think you like the idea of being the guy calling the plays from the field, because we all have the picture of when one of Kiffin's plays worked at Alabama, the arms go up in celebration. It's the kind of thing where people notice the guy who called the play. I think a lot of offensive coordinators view that spot on the field as the next step towards moving over and becoming somebody's head coach. And that's just a fact of life and a reality for the Georgia situation right now, that there are a lot of assistants on this roster who could be very close to either big promotions or big raises, looking to become head coaches. Coley's probably not the only one. And, as Georgia grows as a program, this is just a natural byproduct of that. The coaches that help you win your national championship will eventually want to go out on their own and win their national championships as well. And Coley, who has been upwardly mobile to this point in his career, that's what's gotten him to the spot as the Georgia offensive coordinator. Would not surprise me to have him also be looking at the next big move he can make. For a guy like him, who's proven himself to be a very good recruiter, and I believe a really top-flight offensive mind, although this is his first opportunity to actually be the play caller for Georgia, seeing him become a head coach sooner rather than later, that would not surprise me at all. Hey, real quick before we get ready to let you go, let me tell you about something really fun coming up this weekend at Callaway Resort and Gardens. How about the Hot Air Balloon Festival? This is really fun. Now, you can still get your tickets for this, and you can get discounts and express entry if you buy your tickets in advance. There's live music. There's Friday Night Balloon Glow. There's beach activities because the beach is still open there. There's a classic car show and so much more. Now, a lot of you are maybe thinking, well, I couldn't be in Nashville for the UGA game this weekend, so what can I do? Let me suggest the Hot Air Balloon Festival at Callaway Resort and Gardens. It's a great place to hang out and enjoy a beautiful, what I'll call early fall or late summer weekend. It's going to be a great place to be. Callaway Resort and Gardens for the Hot Air Balloon Festival. Beautiful, beautiful place. If you're watching on video, you can see that right now. Go to CallawayGardens.com to find out more information about this. Let me give you the website one more time. CallawayGardens.com to find more about this. All right, we are getting ready for Nashville on Saturday. Can't wait for that. It's also busy here around Dog Nation over the course of the next couple days as well. Of course, Wednesday afternoons being Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. A little later on today, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, Jeff Sintel and I will talk about all the latest UGA recruiting news. Darnell Washington's top 3, season debuts for some of the 2020 class this past weekend. More on the gridiron this upcoming weekend. A lot of that with Jeff Sintel here. We've also got a really fun show debuting this week with our buddy John Stinchcomb. We're calling it the Marlowe's Matchup, where we look ahead at the upcoming game for Georgia against Vanderbilt. It's going to be a weekly staple for us, and it'll be live at a few Marlowe's from time to time during the season. We'll tell you about those as they come up, and a lot more fun and surprises as well. So stay close to DawgNation.com, the DawgNation video channels, for more on that all week and all season long. And by the way, Gator Hater Updater, about 1,033 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. We'll see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily. And on video, good to have you with us. Time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down Air heating, plumbing, electric. Of course, R.S. Andrews does all those things for us. They can do all those things for you, and you're going to want to check them out. Go to rsandrews.com. You can find out more information about that. It's about to be hot again. That means if your house is not as cool as it needs to be, you need to cool it down with our $99 Smiley tune-up. R.S. Andrews trained, smart folks are going to show up at your house, going to do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. It's a $99 Smiley tune-up to get your system back to factory fresh specs. But you got to check them out online at rsandrews.com. All right, we are going to roll through and get as many comments as we can. We'll try to keep this moving today. I think one of the things that's worked pretty well the last couple of days, since we're trying to do the whole thing a little shorter, is to take more comments, and we want to give good answers to the questions and good responses to the comments, but kind of do it in a semi-rapid fire format. So I think we'll try to keep that going here today and just see if we can give you as much of the floor as we possibly can, give you more chances to do all that. So hopefully that works out well for you. Green Soldier says, B.A. Dennis, our resident Miami fan, finally showed up and is now claiming that Miami's an 11-1 team. Well, listen, I guess you gotta do what you do. So that I'm at least glad to have Dennis back. Although he's gonna have to take a little bit of medicine here for a little while. Johnny Lester says, I am so pumped to see the greatest roster ever assembled in UGA history to storm the field. Yoo-hoo. And Johnny, I think that's objectively true. On paper, this is the greatest roster that Georgia has ever had. The most talented, the deepest roster that Georgia's ever had. The reason why, for some fans, that doesn't go all the way towards making them feel excessively confident about Georgia winning the national championship is because we're in a unique era of the sport in which more resources are marshaled by fewer teams than ever. So while Georgia has its most talented team, you could say the same thing about Alabama and Clemson, and really from a overall measurable composite talent level, Ohio State's actually not all that far behind. So this is not the way it was during the BCS era when there were probably 10 or 12 teams that had a reasonably even distribution of talent, and styles of play probably mattered more than the overall talent does. We're at a time in which, boy, a lot has been kind of congregated amongst a few. And I agree. Georgia looks to be as talented as it's ever been. And now it'll simply try to utilize that talent to its advantage over the course of the season and hope that the natural attrition that comes from injuries, and there may be a situation involving Dylan Moses there at Alabama, hope that the natural level of attrition that occurs for the Bulldogs isn't enough to diminish that talent too much. Bruce Huck says, Dogs 42, Vanderbilt 3. Boy, holding Vanderbilt to less than a touchdown on Saturday would be a pretty fun one. Kenneth Holt says, and we're on YouTube still, other than wide receiver core, is there any position group that Alabama has a significant advantage over Georgia? That is a great question. Alabama's still going to be really good with its defensive line. For instance, I would expect Antonio Alfano, a freshman, to kind of step in there and do more as a freshman than a typical defensive lineman would do. Statistically speaking, unfortunately, Alabama's offensive line was probably better than a year ago. That's an area in which you hope that Georgia is able to improve on that this year. The numbers for Tua Tagovailoa last year were better than for Jake Fromm, and yet Fromm's got his chance to do that this year. Is there an area other than wide receiver, position group-wise, Connor, that you would say Alabama is definitely better than Georgia?
I would say I think you still kind of have to say defensive line. They bring a guy back like in Raekwon Davis, who, while he was disappointing a year ago, he still produced more than I think anyone has on this Georgia defensive line. And it's actually another freshman, DJ Dale, who's actually probably going to start for them at nose tackle this year. And then you have a guy, like Alfano, who's pretty much, I believe he was the composite #1 defensive tackle in the country. So I think you do right now have to give us an edge in the defensive line in Alabama. But offensive line, it's close, but you're probably taking Georgia. Running back, I'm definitely taking Georgia because, Najee Harris, he's suspended. He was the third best running back on that roster a year ago. What do they really have there? Quarterback, it's probably, it's the opposite of offensive line where Tua and Jake Fromm are both great options, but Tua is slightly more proven if he's healthy. Of course, that's a big question there. And then, defensive backs. Alabama brings a lot of guys back there, as Georgia does as well, but Alabama's defensive secondary got shredded in the last 3 games of last season, and there are some legitimate concerns there. And then a linebacker, if everyone for Alabama was healthy, I could probably see that. But now that Dylan Moses might have suffered a severe injury, there's something going on. Someone has to ask Saban, it seems like every year you guys have linebackers sustain season-ending injuries and guys who miss significant time in that position. And I feel like it's no longer just a coincidence. There's something deeper there that why this keeps happening to those guys at that position.
Now, on that, I'm going to disagree with you because this is the same thing they tried to pin on Malzahn a couple of years ago. And I do think that for the most part, injuries are about just bad luck. And even clusters of the same kind of injury to the same position group at the same time, I am overwhelmingly likely to believe that it's just bad luck. And I thought that the questions that Malzahn took on this a couple of years ago, do you remember when he was facing a lot of injuries and there were a lot of media types within that press room trying to ask him questions? I thought that was bad form on the part of the press at the time, and I'm not one to defend Malzahn easily. And I think if Saban's criticized about this, now I'll criticize him about plenty and I enjoy doing it. On this particular point, though, this is, this is wet streets cause rain. This is, I think, trying to find a connection between something that might not be connected.
I'm not saying you have to criticize Saban for it, but I do think that question has to be asked. If it is a significant injury, Josh McMillan has already missed time, or is already going to miss, I believe, the whole season with an injury there, and he was projected to be a starter. You've had sort of serious injuries happen to these guys at this position over and over, and if Saban says it's bad luck, I'll take his word for it. But if he says, maybe we have to examine how we work these guys out and put them through practice, that's, I think, something to consider as well.
Scott Harris says he agrees with me that it's way easier to call plays from the booth than it is on the field. Do you agree with my overly hot take on this, that it's 1,000,000% easier in the booth than on the field? The OCs that want to be on the field want to be head coaches. Do you agree with me on this?
I don't know about that. My mic is being very weird today. Sorry about that. My thing is, because you're up in the press box during games and I'm on the field, and I've been in press boxes before, and it is somewhat similar. And I feel like I see the game better from a field level, just in terms of stories.
Do you really?
And in terms of seeing like little things, maybe not like it is absolutely easier to watch all 11 guys or all 22 guys from the press box, but from the field level. If I know to look for a certain thing or two or what I'm looking at, I feel like it is easier to sort of pick up on things and see what guys are doing.
So this is not a perfect analogy, but let's say you and I were going to go to the game as fans and we're going to be at Sanford Stadium. I can offer you a 50-yard line front row or 50-yard line 45th row. You'd want the 45th row ticket.
Yes, but it's a little
it's a little different because front row is behind the bench.
Yeah.
I do get that.
Yeah.
So it's not a perfect analogy.
If you are offering me suite seats or field passes, I would take field passes.
Now that I would agree with you on this. Somebody a moment ago, and I apologize for not remembering the name, said over under 5 sacks for it's Double R who asked this. Over under 5 sacks for Georgia on Saturday. Here's the thing you got to remember. Our magic number that we've kicked around here on DawgNation Daily is 40. Now, to get to 40 for the regular season, you need somewhere between 3 and 4 each and every Saturday. 3 per game in the regular season gets you to 36. 4 per game in the regular season gets you to 48. So you need somewhere between 3 and 4 each week. So I know we're all looking for a major upgrade in the sack performance for Georgia, but you don't need 5 to get there. Now, it'd be nice to get 5, but you don't need 5 to get there. You need about 3 or about 4, and you need them every single game. So I'm going to go under on that, under the 5, because if Georgia finds a way to get 3 or 4 on Saturday, then we're talking about being, I'm going to use this phrase loosely, ahead of the pace it would have set for itself in previous years. Let me go to Facebook here for a little bit.
I would also take the under. I think Vanderbilt's going to try and establish the run with Keyshawn Vaughn, and a year ago that was where Georgia was weaker, just in terms of stopping the run. And Vanderbilt ran the ball pretty well against Georgia in the first half, and I think that's why you're not going to see them drop back 40, 45 times to maybe get to a point where you're getting that many sacks.
Yeah, I mean, my thing for Georgia, the number that really is interesting to me on Saturday is that average yards per run for Vanderbilt. Can you keep that number, somewhere below 4? I mean, let me look at this from last year real quick. Let me see if I can pull this up quickly. So last year, Vaughn, he averaged 7.92 yards per carry. Vanderbilt as a team averaged 5.02. That also includes sacks, so that's going to be a little misleading. I mean, Can you keep him at 4 or less? I think that's a really big deal. One of the stats that I always like to look at is what's called success rate. It's, what do you get on first down? Do you get 5 yards on first down? Do you get 70% of the yards you need on second down? Do you convert third and fourth downs? Can Georgia limit the successful plays for Vanderbilt when it tries to rush the football? Y'all watch that. Is Vanderbilt facing 2nd and 5 or is it facing 2nd and 7? That's a big deal. I don't think this game's going to be close on Saturday, but I am curious to see just how effective the Vanderbilt attack can be. And I mean that on both sides of the ball. How much can Vanderbilt limit Georgia defensively? How much can Georgia just thwart anything that Vanderbilt wants to do when the Commodores' offense is out there? Those are the numbers that really matter to me. If Georgia gets 3 sacks on Saturday, that's a success for me for right now. But the more important thing is, can you keep Vaughn to 3.9 yards a carry? Can you keep him to 4.1 yards a carry? That to me is what I'm really looking for there.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm looking for the front seven, it's not necessarily a specific number or a sack total. It's, can this front seven be dominant? And the secondary a year ago, while they may not have had, the raw number totals or interceptions or pass deflections, they were a dominant secondary. Can Georgia against Vanderbilt, a team that's got some weapons and got some, even though they have major questions at quarterback, they have some guys who can do some stuff. Can Georgia's defensive line sort of dominate a game in which, they probably have a talent advantage, at least in the line of scrimmage, and sort of, take some of those skill position players out of the game? And that's the sort of most important thing I think I'm looking for defense.
Matt Rukavina is calling for a big game from Jermaine Johnson. I think that Jermaine Johnson's a big part of this, but I am concerned about his ankle. Connor, you're at practice a lot more than I am. What do you think of Jermaine Johnson's ankle at the moment?
Kirby said he has not been 100% this entire practice, and we sort of, watching drills and whatnot, and getting to see a little bit more of these last couple of days with practice in terms of first team and second team guys. Azeez Ojulari's been the first team guy at that sort of jack outside linebacker position. Nolan Smith has been that second guy. So, I wonder if health has been a concern with Johnson. And basically, that's been the case with him since he enrolled. I think he can be a player. But, they're going to want to – I think Azeez is going to have a big game just as a way to try and validate all the offseason talk he's gotten. And Nolan Smith, I think the biggest thing you can say about him to this point is that he plays hard every play. That's something that people rave about, and that's something that gets you on the field. And if your ankle is hobbled or your foot's hurt, you're probably not going to be able to go 100% every single play. And I think that's where Johnson might fall down a little bit in the pecking order for the depth chart.
Yeah, that ankle situation is. It
just lingers.
Yeah, this is an overly simplistic statement. It's really hard to rush the passer if you got a hurt ankle.
Yep.
I mean, that's an ankle position right there. You're getting that thrust off the ground and everything else. Derek Green brought up an interesting point. I think this is he said something slightly different, but it leads me to say this. Vanderbilt's not the worst SEC team Georgia's going to play this year, I don't believe. I've picked Kentucky to finish last in the SEC East.
I did as well.
So I don't think that and by the way, not to get lost here, but not everybody's doing that. Who's pretty high on Kentucky this year is Kirk Herbstreit.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know how he would even know. I'm not sure how much Kentucky he's even been reading up on. But he's semi-high on Kentucky as way better than I think they're going to be. But the team that Georgia sees, and then we think of Vanderbilt as historically the worst team in the SEC, but they're not the worst SEC team on Georgia's schedule, nor do I think they're the worst team in the SEC. I mean, I think teams like Ole Miss, who I believe is likely to lose.
I think Ole Miss is definitely going to be the worst team.
Yeah, likely to lose to Memphis on Saturday. At one point in time, I was a little higher on Arkansas. I'm kind of moving off that as we get close to the season. I think there may be at least 2 SEC West teams, Ole Miss and Arkansas, who are worse than Vanderbilt as well.
Team, I would agree with that. By the way, I just want to bring up, talked at length today about Brian Herrien, and Kirby Smart spoke about him last night. He's probably going to be the guy who gets the most carries on Saturday. I heard a little bit about DeAndre Swift. We've talked a lot about Tamir White in recent days. I just have to bring up that, once again, BA is sleeping on James Cook.
So what do you think Cook does on Saturday then? Let's go on the record here. Honestly, this is like some of my favorite thing about the last couple of weeks is like everybody's just like kind of like pinning these like sort of hot stat takes to the wall, which I kind of like. So it's time to start doing this for Cook. What do you think for James on Saturday?
5 rushes, 3 catches, more total touches than Zamir White.
That's a strong take. That's a really strong take. Now, here's my question. That's a stat line that makes a lot of sense. And by the way, you didn't say 3 targets. You said 3 catches. That's a pretty good day. I am of the firm belief that Georgia's leading receiver in terms of total yards on Saturday will be Demetrius Roberts. I feel very strongly about that.
Who did you say I couldn't put here?
Demetrius Roberts.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
If we were doing Super Bowl-style prop bets for the season opener, I feel very strong that D-Rob leads the team in receiving this day. So do your 3 catches come at the expense of D-Rob then? It's going to be tough to get a slot receiver leading the team in receiving. Do you think that Cook gets the ball thrown to him out of the backfield as a running back or as a slot receiver?
So can I up the ante on my take here?
By all means.
I think all of James Cook's touches, excluding kick return, because I do believe he and Demetrius Robertson are going to be the 2 kick returners you see back there. All of James Cook's offensive touches come in the second half of the game.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. That makes a little more sense, and that's a very specific and I think a well-rounded prediction there. I mean, I do think there's an opportunity for Georgia to use a little more 2-back stuff if it wanted to, with Cook kind of being that jet sweep style or potential slot receiver. But, we can only put 11 guys on the field. And if you put Cook there, then you're taking a D-Rob or a Blaylock off the field to do that, almost for sure.
Curious Jackson as well.
Yeah.
I get why Cook might project as a slot receiver, but they got a lot of guys there that can play. And especially just given how high I've been on Blaylock all offseason, how high we're both on Robertson going into this game, I don't know if you necessarily want to take slot reps away from guys who are probably in the big games later on in the season against Alabama, potentially Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, those type of games. Blaylock, Robertson, Jackson, those are the guys who you're going to need in the slot in those instances. And I wonder if you want to just try and get those guys reps now. That way they're more comfortable for it when those big games come.
A lot of really good Facebook comments coming in. Mark Godfrey asked what I think is a fun question. We've seen McCole Hardman burst through the banner to start the game for Georgia the last couple of years, and I think Jeff wrote about this at one point in time. I honestly don't know what the significance of McCole doing that was. Why was it that McCole got that job, Connor? Do you know?
He always wanted to be the first one through the banner.
So he just wanted it, and he got it.
Wanted it. He wanted it more than the other guys.
Well, that's what Georgia football is all about, dadgummit. What do you think? Mark says, who's going to be that guy this year? Is there a good answer? LeCount comes to mind for me, but I also want him carrying that bat.
LeCount will not be the first one through. I put pretty good money down on that one.
Why do you say that so strongly?
Because he's traditionally he's one of the last guys to come out, and part of that is because he is carrying the bat.
That bat is such a – I mean, we're getting pretty close between Miami with its 305 chain and its 4-finger rings and Georgia's bats. And, I mean, we're getting pretty close to all this being like Mad Max from Thunderdome with everybody wearing props and stuff.
I'm all for it. I think we need more props.
I don't have a problem with props in college football. So who is the best candidate in your mind to do this?
Eric Stokes.
He's a good one. That's a really good one.
Got the speed to do it.
I don't mind that. You got to be able to jump kind of high, though.
Yeah. He's got good measurables. A fan. I think he's going to end up being a fan favorite of sorts. He's got the right kind of energy to sort of be that first guy through the flag. I think he is a guy to look out for.
Can I be negative about one thing?
Yeah.
I kind of miss the old school days when the sign was made of paper and you really broke it.
Yes.
Most of you are probably aware of this. This thing is like Velcro now.
They still do it in high school. Oh, you're talking about the flag. Yeah, at the high school level, they still do the
like
big
the real paper.
With everything.
Yeah.
You bust through that.
And I know this is like the dumbest thing I've ever said. But I do kind of like the real paper that you have to bust through. Now, you got to put some little, cuts in it along the way. Otherwise, the wind will blow it down or something like that. But I kind of miss the real paper that you bust through. Bob Harris agrees.
Wyatt Fielding, if this happens, this would be incredible. Matthew, now, it's at Vanderbilt, which almost definitely means it's not going to happen. Matthew Bowling runs through the banner first.
That would be amazing. That'd actually be really amazing. It'd almost be like one of those things of, how Ohio State has like the dotting of the I, and most of the time it's a sousaphone player that does it, but I believe they've had celebrities do that. I want to say Buster Douglas did that after he beat Mike Tyson. I don't know why I remember that, but he was from Ohio and he did that. What if Georgia started having a celebrity bust through the sign every single week. And it's like, because they do have the celebrity that does the pregame video now.
Yeah.
You could have Matthew Bowling. You could have Maria Taylor. You could have DawgNation Daily. You could have a whole host of people doing that eventually. Ooh, Miriam's got a pretty good idea. What if it was just Zamir White, like tough and ready to go, intimidating? That's not a bad idea, Miriam.
I'd like to see him do it for the first Georgia home game because I think that would be like a lot louder, and I think it'd be a lot cooler if he did it in Sanford State.
What if, of course, it all goes back to professional wrestling. What if like two security guards tore it back and then Zamir just came walking out first? That'd look amazing. Like, in other words, someone breaks the sign for him and then he just walks out and leads the team who runs behind. I wouldn't mind seeing that. Joshua Campbell says Rodrigo Blankenship. That's not a bad idea either.
Bobby Leathers, over under 5 catches for the Georgia tight ends on Saturday.
4 catches, Georgia tight ends. That's a good one. That's a really good one. I'd be a fool to go over, and I hate to be that way, but I would be.
I'm going to take the over.
Really?
I'm going to say they're going to get Charlie. I'm not now. You give me yards. I don't know if they're going to have more than 50 yards. But I think Georgia tight ends are going to have 6 catches.
Somebody suggested Pastor Troy to bust through the sun. Is that the team chaplain? Is that who that is? I'm just kidding. I know that's a hip hop guy. I was just kidding. I just wanted to let y'all think that. Chris Brooks says send BA through the banner first. I wouldn't mind doing that. John Chappell says let Herschel do it. He'd
have to give BA a big head start.
I can bust through that banner. Now the paper banner, I'm not sure I can do that, but the Velcro thing, I can bust through that. Crow King 123 says Warner, I think, will be a monster this year. I hope so. I hope they use him creatively this year because I actually think that Warner is a pretty interesting weapon. And I go back to what Rick Gilbert said about.
Oh, wow.
What are you wowing about?
So Matt Zenitz of AL.com, he is reporting that Dylan Moses suffered a torn ACL practice.
So I said this before, and I'll say this again. I'll get back to the Warner point after this. Listen, I want Alabama to be bad so bad I can't stand it. Y'all know that. But I don't want it this way. I don't root for anybody to get hurt. I don't. I want the best players in the SEC playing. And it's Dylan's a guy I like to watch play. So I hate the fact that he is injured here. That's just devastating news to the Crimson Tide, and I don't sort of revel in that and cheer about that at all. It does lead me to the curious question of, the one thing I've been saying for Georgia that I want it to move away from is the scenario in 2017 where if Roquan Smith had gotten hurt in 2017, it was game over, go home. It's Outback Bowl City if you don't have Roquan Smith for those games that really mattered for Georgia in 2017. Alabama has been a team that was built to withstand any individual injury. Christian Miller gets hurt. Anybody like that gets hurt. Alabama just withstands the injury, and they kind of roll on from this. This linebacking core right now, though, after McMillan goes down and freshman's going to start. This what's his name? Mac Wilson goes to the NFL. Mm-hmm. This linebacking core is not as deep as we're used to seeing the Alabama situation being. So from a practical football standpoint, is Alabama built to withstand the Dylan Moses injury right now? I'm not quite so sure that it is. Now, listen, before I let Connor talk, and I promise I'm going to see the floor in a moment, the Vegas people will tell you this. There aren't very many quarterbacks who are worth 7 points a game at the college level. There are probably 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the sport who are worth up to 7 points a game. So ultimately, Dylan Moses' absence is only going to matter a couple points per game for Alabama one way or another. So this is not the difference in 12-0 and 10-2. That's probably not the case on that. But that doesn't mean it's not significant. Do you think Alabama's built to withstand this? Right now, I don't believe they are.
It's with the losses they've had at linebacker and just you could argue, all right, so if we flash back to September 6th, 7th, whenever after the SEC championship game was a year ago, and you look at the projected guys who are going to be Alabama's starting linebackers, or top 3 linebackers, McMillan, Mac Wilson, Dylan Moses, all of those guys will play a total of 0 snaps this year. That is at those inside linebacker positions, obviously. Mm-hmm. Alabama's got a lot of talent, and they've done a great job stockpiling depth, but this is almost certainly the weakest Alabama has been at inside linebacker. Yeah. And I don't know about that first year, but basically from 2008 on when they had Rolando McClain, they have always had a great inside linebacker, and I think this is maybe the first time you can really say that's not going to be the case this season.
Devin Glenn also says it's the most significant preseason injury that Saban's had. Would you agree with that? The truth is, I can't remember. Grace is probably watching. He may be able to provide more insight on that.
Yeah, but
in recent years, I can't think of one preseason bigger than this.
Yeah, this one really jumps to the front of the mind as far as guys in the preseason who were lost for the entire year.
I don't believe you've picked Alabama to win the national championship, but if you had, would this make you want to take your chip off the table?
I think you kind of have to think hard about it. If you were gonna, and G. Grace can probably fill us in more. If you were gonna pick who is the best player on Alabama's defense right now and at the end of the season, Moses is on that incredibly short list, and probably the most, Shyam Carter and Trayvon Diggs, Xavier McKinney are good players, but I don't know if they'd impact the game the same way that Moses would. So, Alabama losing their probably most impactful defender, that should make you think long and hard about them as a possible national championship pick. And I don't think the SEC is going to get two teams in this year. But I think from a playoff perspective, you do have to sort of reevaluate things with Alabama.
Yeah, Johnny Lester says, according to guys like Phil Steele, Moses was listed as the number one linebacker in the entire sport. This is a big deal, and this won't be the last big injury we have. And that's one of the reasons why eventually injuries get mitigated, because when Alabama plays Georgia in December, who's to say that Georgia doesn't have so-and-so injured? So a lot of this kind of stuff kind of worked its way out in the wash, and for the most part, fans overrate the impact of injuries. Vegas has got mountains of data to back this up, and yet doesn't mean it's not a big one. And at the start of the season, this is a pretty big one here as well. Chevron Hannah saying it's a setback for Alabama for sure. Let me do a couple Facebook comments. I think we've done actually a pretty good job today. We've taken a lot of comments and kind of a shorter window of time, so we're doing a pretty good job on this. Bobby Leather's good question. How many pass attempts does Fromm get on Saturday? 19. Does that sound about right?
I'm looking up his stats from last year's Vanderbilt game. A season ago against Vanderbilt, Fromm had 23 pass attempts and a 41-13 win.
So I'm not far off with 19. Maybe Georgia wants to throw the ball a little more this year, but
I will say 25.
You think he throws the ball 25 times?
I think they want to get these wide receivers, at least based on what they said, unless they're just out and out lying to us, unless Kirby Smart's out and out lying to us, they want to get these guys reps, catches, meaningful, game moments, and I think to do that, you got to have Jake Fromm throw the ball probably a little bit more than you would like to see him do so.
Is Pickens still wearing 83 at practice?
Yes.
Do you think he's wearing 1 on Saturday?
No.
You don't?
I
thought that's interesting to hear you say that. I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm interested to hear you saying that.
This is a guy who tweeted, "Is the number 1 jersey cursed?"
There's an argument to be made that you might not want him to. I was of the assumption he'd be wearing 1 on Saturday, though, so you don't think so necessarily.
I don't know either way. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. I kind of like to see him come out in 83 because 1, that puts a big target on your back.
Yeah.
That's a guy you got to pay attention to. Whereas 83, the opponents might be sleeping on him a little bit, and that might surprise them. When wait a minute, this guy is 83. He can't be the guy wearing 83. Can't be this good.
Yeah, 83 doesn't run past you. 1 kind of mosses you in the corner of the end zone. Yeah, these are some good stuff. Y'all got some good stuff coming in here. Bob Harris says Fromm taken out for most of the fourth quarter. Do you agree with that? That Stetson Bennett gets a quarter of action on Saturday?
Oh yeah, I would agree with that. I think Fromm, if Georgia's up by 4 touchdowns in that third quarter, and say they're up 24-7, 24-10 going into halftime, they get 2 touchdowns to open the third quarter, as we've seen Georgia kind of like to do in the past. I think after that second touchdown, they say, all right, Jake, seen enough from you. We got to keep you healthy. Stetson, you're up.
Along those lines, Matt Rukavina predicts the score will be 17-3 at halftime. You think this fan base, as pins and needles as it is on right now, as kind of edgy and restless as it is, you think this bunch can handle 17-3 at halftime? I'm not quite so sure it can.
It depends when those touchdowns are scored. If they get, one their opening drive and one right before the half, I think they're feeling a little bit better. I think you should be able to handle, especially if the defense is only giving up 3 points. I think you should certainly be able to handle it.
You let this bunch get a little brown liquor in them come halftime on Saturday. They may not be super thrilled with 17-3. Might not be super thrilled with that. All right, really quickly, Connor, you got a final thought or anything?
Bummer about Dylan Moses. I'm a guy who pretty routinely says he loves football and the sport of football. In college football specifically is better when Dylan Moses is playing it, and I love watching great linebackers play. And it's going to be a bummer, just a college football fan in general, to not see a guy like that go out there and play it this year.
There's only so much you can do to mitigate against the realistic injury factor that exists with the sport, and I mean this in all sincerity. Prayers out to Moses for a speedy recovery, because that's a good football player, and I like watching him, especially when they're not playing against Georgia. I like watching him do his thing. Derek Green says, "Who's on the bus Saturday?" Is there an interesting answer to this question? Someone we might think that won't be, someone that we don't think that will. For instance, last year, a guy like Owen Condon traveled more than you might realize. I'm assuming Ryan Davis and Tresman Marshall don't go on Saturday, correct?
Can I give you a name?
Well, but I'm right on Marshall and Davis first,
yes,
right?
I don't think they're going to travel.
So give me a couple more interesting names like that.
I think one 5-star member in the 2019 class will not be traveling.
That's a strong. You don't think Cade Mays is going?
I said 2019. You confuse Cade Mays with Clay Webb.
That's exactly right.
I think Cade Mays.
I'm very impressed that you made sense of all of that.
I think
you're
Cade
exactly
Mays
right.
Can start on, and they both have 4-letter first and last names.
To be clear, I'm talking about Clay Webb. Yes, I'm 1,000,000% talking about Clay Webb. You don't think Clay Webb's going to?
Yeah, sort of going through the math,
Nashville.
they're probably going to bring about 10 offensive linemen. Now, if Jamari Sawyer doesn't practice today, I don't think he's making the trip. So and I unfortunately will not be in Athens today, but if you see the reports that Sawyer was once again missing practice, that might open the door for him potentially. But let's assume that Sawyer is traveling and is playing, because that's what Kirby Smart has indicated to us to this point. I think those next three guys, Condon and Justin Schaefer are going to travel. Those are going to be your 8th and 9th guys traveling. Okay. And then for that 10th spot, you've got a guy like Warren Erickson, who would be like a backup.
You think Erickson's ahead of I almost said Mays again. I'm not talking about Cade Mays. I'm talking about Clay Webb.
Yeah.
You think Erickson's ahead of Webb?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, Chris.
And that's what it'll come down to. And if Sawyer doesn't go, Mays or Webb, you got me doing it.
I'm sorry.
Webb might end up on the bus, but in terms of recruiting, and that's to kind of be expected. Webb said he came in and he wanted to learn, and coming in he knew he probably wasn't going to play a whole lot this first year. And I think just because of his 5-star rating, it's okay that he doesn't travel. He was never going to need to be a real piece for this team right away. That doesn't mean that he's not playing well. It's just that Condon and Schaefer and Erickson, they have a little more experience and they've sort of been through this stuff before.
Really quickly, Chandler Johnson and John Arena basically asking the same thing. What about Julian Rochester? Kirby was coy about this the other day. If you don't have Rochester and Marshall, and Rochester's the guy we're talking about now, that's a loss to the defensive line. Now, I don't know how Rochester factors into all this right now, but that's one of your higher end, what you think of as one of your guys that potentially has a higher end ceiling along that defensive line. If he's not healthy enough to play on Saturday, that's a disappointment, right?
Yeah. We talked to David Marshall on Friday, and he sort of indicated, it's going to depend on how I'm feeling with his injury. Now, these guys will probably find out if they're traveling on Friday, but I do kind of lean to the side that Rochester is going to be there. He's been going through practice, and it does in the portions we've seen, it doesn't look like he's been particularly limited a whole lot.
Yeah, Devin Glenn says he doesn't think Rochester's traveling. I really think that if you're basing that on what Kirby said on Monday or whatever the day that was, I just think that was him just deflecting on that question. I don't think that should be taken to mean one thing or another.
Right.
I don't know what's going to happen, but surely to goodness, and I know it's in I guess it was reported to be an ACL situation or whatever, but surely to goodness he's about ready now. But it's going to be worth watching. That's going to be worth watching. I would say that's one of those things, and there's not a chance in the world I'll do this, but Connor might do this. Get up in that press box early, tweet that, because the list will be out now.
Yeah.
I guess Vanderbilt's not printing papers this year, which y'all don't care about, but that list is going to be out there. So we'll try to get it to you as quickly as we can on Saturday. early on Saturday afternoon, worth paying attention to and worth watching. All right, we're getting ready to go here today. Before we wrap up, let me remind you of a couple things. First of all, my friends at the AJC, great opportunity to get your Atlanta news now from AJC.com each and every morning. Really good stuff. You can follow along with the Falcons who are getting ready to start their season, obviously recapping everything going on in the Atlanta Braves, and the sort of the more serious news to stay in touch with everything happening around the water cooler where you work. AJC.com is your source for Atlanta news now. And, of course, R.S. Andrews brings the R.S. Andrews Cool Down to you. Air, heating, plumbing, electric. They play all those positions for us here at DawgNation Daily, and they can play all of those for you as well. So if your water heater goes out or something like that, just go over to rsandrews.com and let Dari and the gang do good work for you. They'll show up on time, do the work that's promised, for the price that's promised. There are no bad surprises with my friends at RS Andrews, because story after story, they have been delivering smiles. They'll deliver one for you as well. We'll see you back here tomorrow for DawgNation Daily, and, of course, the RS Andrews Cool Down after that. You have a great day, everybody.